I want to make sure that you get the opportunity to introduce Dr. Shayne. Dr. Shayne is currently the Assistant Dean for GME and the Associate DIO for Emory University School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Shayne is a professor and vice chair of education in the Department of Emergency Medicine at Emory, and he has been on faculty since 1996. Prior to his current position, he was the Emergency Medicine Program Director for 17 years. He's graduated the University of Pennsylvania in 1981, the University of Illinois residency program in 1993. He is a past president of CORD and an ABEM oral boards examiner. He serves on the RRCEM and is the past chair of the ACGME Emergency Medicine Residency Review Committee. Not insignificantly, he has also received the ACGME Parker J. Palmer Courage to Teach Award in 2010. If you haven't identified, Dr. Shayne is one of the leaders in emergency medicine education, and we're really pleased that he's here to help share some of his lessons. And as I said, he's somebody that I look up to quite a bit, so I'm very glad that you were able to make it. Thank you, Dr. Shayne.
Well, thank you, Fiona. One of my pet peeves is people who start off their presentations with an apology about how they're not worthy or something, so I'm going to avoid that. I'm tremendously honored that you thought to ask for my thoughts, and I've put some thought into this and tried to figure out what would work. As I shared with you earlier, I'm in my favorite sweats at home with a glass of red wine, and I hear dinner being made. So it's very relaxed. We can take this any way you guys want to do that, since we're a small group. I have no financial disclosures or lack of interest. I do want to disclose that I'm not a born leader, that I've learned a lot from failure and mistakes, but I think that I've been fairly successful in an academic emergency medicine career, and I wanted to take that experience and show you how that if you're not born with natural talent, you can work really hard and do a decent job if you get the Crash Davis analogy. I'm not going to summarize how to be a leader. There's lots of courses and seminars, workshops, books that tell you how to do that. And I don't think that would be helpful because you can more easily read that than listen to me. So what I really want to do is try and focus on the few pearls that I've picked up along my career that I think are really relevant to what we do, that have helped me, and wisdom is knowledge that you gain only through experience. So what does my experience help me tell? I am not used to talking about me. I don't ever put pictures of me in. So I accepted this as a challenge, and I'm not going to apologize. I have a joke with my residents, I don't ever hug them until graduation. So this group last year took it seriously, and my last graduation as program director, I got the group hug. What Fiona asked me to cover was sort of what my journey is and the experiences and lessons learned from the leadership roles that I've had, how I develop teams, and resources for those who are interested in similar paths. And I'm going to take this not too literally, but just sort of craft it to what I think has been useful to me. I have what I think of as my fortune cookies, which are little sayings or snippets or truisms that rang with me that I take solace in, that have helped me define how I think about different situations. So the bulk of what I wanted to cover was the fortune cookies that I've learned to live by in my various leadership roles. Looking for a definition of leadership, I like this one. The process of persuasion or example by which people are induced to pursue objectives held by the leader or organization. I like it because it frames it as a verb, not a noun. Leadership is not who you are, it's not what your title is, it's not what authority you have or what you've been titled to do, but it's how you exert it. I also like it because it's a little sinister, induced to pursue objectives, and it reminds you of the responsibility that you have as a leader to be sure that you're using your authority to do something that's good and useful. So what is my path and what did I learn? Just briefly. I like this picture because I don't have a bald spot. All right. So my first real leadership experience was in high school. I was the yearbook editor, elected position, responsible for the yearbook, and it was a pretty miserable experience. I was not confident. I was sarcastic, snide, socially inept, and treated failure with being pissed off and taking it out on people. As a result of which I did most of the work myself. You learn from your failures, and what I learned was I didn't really have a taste for leadership, and I didn't feel that I had any innate skills. I followed that up by having no leadership roles in college, no leadership roles in medical school, no leadership roles in residency, and I started off in community practice about an hour outside of Chicago as a working ER doc with no leadership roles. And I value that time, but I clearly wasn't on any sort of leadership path. Then my wife and I took a gap year, actually 18 months, sold or put away all our stuff and backpacked around the world and spent some time in Indonesia, Asia, lived in India for a while. And I'm a big fan of gap years. I'm really glad that that's something that's come into style, because as a baby boomer, I was just always going from the next thing. There was no real thought or deliberation or choice in life. And it was really valuable for me to take a break, which meant I had to consider how I was going to re-enter and think about what I wanted to accomplish. And what I realized is that I wanted the teamwork and the esprit de corps of being back in academics where you were working with other people. I wanted to be back in a safety net hospital like I was at Cook County. And I wanted to have a career that I created something and had the legacy. And I think it's really important to know what it is in your life that's important to you and what your motivations are. What my wife got out of it is that she didn't want to live anywhere cold again. So when we got back to Chicago, I was looking for a warm weather safety net hospital academic program. And I was hired at Emory, which was a fantastic opportunity in a part of the country I didn't know, and in a place that was sort of in crisis right before the Olympics, a lot going on. And there was lots of opportunities to step up and do things. And I sort of dove in and started picking up responsibilities. I realized immediately that there were all these rotating residents from other services. We had about 250 or 20 a month that weren't getting any sort of curriculum or evaluation. And so I just volunteered to take that over, and I had a title. In 2 years, I was the assistant program director. The year after that, I became program director, really only 3 years into an academic career, which was a lot of nerve, but people believed in me. One of the pivotal moments was when I took my first leadership role nationally, which was the old standardized assessment methods for CORD, which is when the ACGME came out with this new concept of core competencies, and none of us knew how to do it. And the committee came together and made some real practical tools like the SDOT. And it was the first time that I managed peers. And I had an exciting committee of other program directors, a number of them senior to me, who were really excited and engaged and productive. And it gave me a lot of confidence. I was on the CORD board, which was a leap of faith, CORD president, RRC and chair, and now DIO for a GME system that has 1,300 residents and 106 programs.
Wow.
And there were lots of different organizations that had opportunities. These are the ones that I participated in. I think they're all worthy and good, but Fiona just reminded me that I chaired the consult committee for SAEM. I took a leadership role in the milestones, I'm sorry, with ABEM. They told us that we'd rewrite them after a year, so I never thought that they'd stick around that long. But those were high functioning groups that are really impressive individuals that was a real honor to be able to help define the mission. So the core one I want to do is what I think of as my little fortune cookies or truisms that have helped me personally be successful. Sorry, that was a sip of wine. One, I think this one is a Woody Allen, but I'm not sure where it came from. 90% of a success is just showing up. This is so true. In every group and organization that I've been in, there's 10 or 20% of the people that you just know are going to show up, do a good job, always be there. What we call at Emory the usual suspects. And when I come back from a recruitment night or a journal club and my wife says, let me guess who was there, she always knows who it was that shows up because they're the ones who always do. And being part of that group that always shows up gives you a lot of opportunity because people trust you and know it. And so being the one who shows up for interviews, journal club, who shows up at the meetings, who shows up for the committee meetings, and is engaged is half the battle to getting responsibilities that lead to leadership. But to mix an analogy, the elephant in the room is how do you balance that? Because you also have to show up for your family. You have to show up for your kids, for your significant other. You have to show up for your community or your faith. You have to show up for yourself sometimes. And so you need to be strategic and pick the things that you can really devote yourself to and know strategically when it is to say, no, this is not where my career is going. This is not what I'm going to do. And what I've done is try to be 100% in the moment where I am. So when I'm at work, I'm fully engaged in work and I work really hard. When I come home, I shed work and I'm completely there with my family. I have never traveled on business with my family. I always felt that business travel, you needed to be able to be free to really work with the people that come there. And when I'm on vacation, I totally disconnect from business. So you have to show up, but it's about being totally present when you're there.
And there's a question here about how do you know when to say no? And if you're the showing up guy, when do you say no?
Exactly. It comes from experience. None of this stuff today is something you can read about. You do need to have an internal discussion about what you want. And if what you want is to be, say, the program director, you're going to show up for conference, you're going to show up for journal clubs, you're going to show up for CCC, PEC, you're going to show up for some things that are important to your chair, like maybe interviewing faculty candidates or GME things. But maybe you're not going to be on the promotions committee, you don't show up for the research club, and you just make it very clear. And also, you don't pick leadership responsibilities based on the honor. There was at one point in my career where I got a bunch of calls about being a chair, and that was really flattering, but I knew that wasn't my skill set or what I really wanted to do. And it was having a clear vision of where I was going. But you can't teach that.
Yeah.
So Fortune Cookie 2 is one that gave me a lot of solace early in my career, and I've learned to ignore it later in my career. I actually think I did learn it in a fortune cookie, but it sounded really profound. And early in my career, when I became program director, I thought, I'm young, they see me as their buddy, that doesn't work. And it's more important that they respect me, that I provide boundaries, that I have some distance, and that nobody thinks that that I show favorites, so that when I tell them they need to do something, they do it. And it was hard, but it worked to a degree. And I took solace in it when I had to be the bad guy, because I never liked being the bad guy, but it's really important to give negative feedback and to help mold people by showing them where they're not performing. And so I lived by that, but then later in my career, as I relaxed and became more comfortable in dealing with other people, I learned fortune cookie number 3. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And this one is totally true. That when I relaxed and started really enjoying my residents, it's sort of almost like my kids, and I love their idealism and their passion and their energy and their inquisitiveness, and I let that show, it was much easier to persuade them to do what I wanted, because they would do almost anything not to be disappointing. And if I was just sad with them instead of angry, it really affected their own sense of reflection. And you still have to not compromise to be liked, but it's okay to let them know that you care for them. And I sort of was thinking about this, and the article that I included, if you see under handouts, I attached an article called Connect and Lead, which is one of the really influential leadership pieces I've ever read, which is a really scientific study of competence versus warmth as a leader. And what is it that people respond to? And people often are proud of their own competence, but they really respect other people for their warmth and compassion and empathy. And it talks, and has some interesting science, both social science and even biochemical science, as to why empathy and caring about people you work for produces better productivity. So I think fortune cookie number 3 trumps number 2, but you need to keep them both in mind. This is one that's around Emory a lot because our founder loved the quote. I think it comes from Harry S. Truman. It's amazing what you can accomplish if you do not care who gets the credit. And when I put together a team, I have a committee or a task force, this is a great guiding principle. If, as a leader, you focus on how you're going to make the people in that group look good, and how they're going to get a publication or they're going to end up presenting something, it's a way to show them you care. It motivates them, and it produces results, and it always reflects back well on you. So you always get some credit, but you consciously work on how to get other people credit. It's really amazing the amount of things that get done. And a lot of times when there's resentment or jealousy or unsure about motives in a group, things really stall. I think it's ironic that this came from Harry S. Truman, because Washington is the last place that this is ever practiced. I don't know where this one came from. I may have made it up, but things like running for the Cord board. I look back and I said, God, well, how did I get that confidence? But you just have to go for things, and you have to acknowledge that you've got some ambition. Ambition is not bad, and you have to put yourself out there. And I was lucky. I had a really fortunate upbringing, and I went to a small private school where we treated the teachers very much like equals, and there was no sense of awe about people who were experts. And I've always sort of felt that the world is run by amateurs like me, and there's no reason that if somebody can do it, I can't do it, and to really question experts. And I find that a lot of people lack that self-confidence. They just weren't born with that, they hold up experts in a sense of awe, and you just have to get over that. The other way to put this fortune cookie is what my buddy Cheryl Heron says: if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So, be willing to take some risks and vie for that leadership position. Sometimes it's like, who wants to lead, and everybody's looking at each other because they're sort of embarrassed to step out and do it, and you just say, me, I'll be happy to do it. This one I definitely made up, my final one. But I really believe this, that If everything's going well, as a leader, you're basically just a manager. To be a hero or to really be a leader, you need problems. You need a crisis that you can help with. The crisis is how you show people you care about them. You know, when a resident calls and say, well, I have an ill parent, I need to go away, it's like, yes, we are going to make this happen for you. You don't worry about how inconvenient it's going to be. It's you demonstrate to them that you're going to take this seriously, and it's your opportunity. Their crisis is your opportunity to be their hero. Overall, it shows the organization that you care about the people, and by attacking the crises, you really demonstrate leadership. I was thinking about this today because I don't know if you guys have listened to what's going on at MSU, where it's like 150 athletes were abused by the team doctor, and now the president's stepping down. I can't believe, I'm sure she was an excellent manager, but people had to have been putting their heads in the sand and like finding reasons to ignore the innuendos and complaints. So there had to be hints around there, and they were ignoring it. They had the opportunity to really be heroes, and instead they were managers and avoided that. Not that I know anything about what's going on, but it's hard to imagine that somebody who had been there for 20 years didn't know.
They actually have a long history of identifying who knew, and
A lot of people who are in leadership positions don't like to deal with problems. And my problem is that you should seek out the problems, because that's your opportunity to really be the hero and fix it, because the problems don't go away if you ignore them. So that's all my fortune cookies, which was really the wisdom that I picked out. I do, to be honest to Fiona's objectives, I had a few things on developing teams. I had a few myths. I think I've covered some of these already. Leadership cannot be learned. I think that natural born leaders can be a little scary, and most leaders most good leaders are people who've really thought about it, practiced it, had experienced failures and learned from that. Myth 2, leaders fit a certain demographic. I think that as a white male, I get certain acceptance, and that there's less confidence from other groups, and that's just not acceptable. Leaders do not have to be extroverts. Extroverts can be excellent leaders, but it's not really what's important. Being charismatic and standing up and giving a speech and igniting a mass is good in certain situations, but not really what's important among high-functioning groups. I'm rarely the expert. I'm there to help people actuate themselves. And leaders should always, mistakes are obvious to everybody, and people will forgive you if you acknowledge it and move on. Leaders are not, it's not random, and you should not be embarrassed about having some ambition and stepping up and volunteering to take leadership positions. This one actually may be true, but most people have something good in them that you can appeal to. So what leaders do, I just do this little exercise at every meeting that I lead. I just like, here's what we're going to accomplish, guys. Here's the overarching point. 2, reinforce values. People will say something idealistic or good or have done something, and you always want to call that out. Just quietly acknowledge it so that everybody in the room realizes, yeah, that was good. Because it's amazing to me how grown-ups still need role models. Role models have been really important to me. And so you point out good things so that even though the grown-ups in the room who are confident can be aware of them. You focus on developing people. You should always be preparing your replacement, because then they'll do the work for you, and that's how you achieve results. I felt I needed to put this in. I think I've sort of said all these things. I'll let you guys read this for a second. I don't want to belabor the point. So here's the unspoken rules, I think, that I've learned over the years. First of all, grown-ups have role models. To me, when I started at Emory, what I admired about Arthur Kellerman was he could say the most idealistic thing and not sound sappy. And as somebody who was sort of cynical and, you know, didn't want to put himself out there, I didn't think that you could just say things that were really idealistic and people would believe you. So for me, to be able to be comfortable saying, you know, I'm really happy to work at a place where I take care of the poorest of the poor and the people who have nothing, and be a servant, I would have been embarrassed about that, but he taught me it's okay to say that, and people will actually take you seriously. I think a leader always needs to be a little bit of cartoon of what they want to project, a little bit more. If you want people to dress well, you have to dress a little bit better. If you want people to be a little bit formal, you have to model behavior that's a little bit more severe than what you're trying to get. People will respect you as much as you respect yourself. So always try and dress up for meetings, show some signs that you respect it, show up on time. Another one of my pet peeves is people who call a meeting, then they're late for their own meetings. Mm-hmm. That does not respect the people that you're working for you or show that you care about them. So you show up, you're well dressed, you take it seriously, you make eye contact. You remember that you're never a civilian, and even when you're the program director and you're hanging out with your assistant and associate program directors and you feel like you're a bunch of buddies, you're still the boss. And anything you do carries just a little bit more weight. So if you look distressed or sad or upset or worried or anxious, deep down, they're going to be even more so. It's going to carry more weight. So you really have to be careful about letting your guard down at some way, because people really look up to you. And never underestimate the power of please and thank you. Just yeah, like we have a scheduler, an administrator who does our schedule for us. Mm-hmm. And every time, for years, every time she sends out our schedule, here's your schedule for next month, I've always said, type back, email, thank you, or appreciate it, or thanks for getting out so early. And last week, I called her up and I said, God, I'm sorry, I didn't put in my schedule request. I know I'm past the deadline. Do you mind? And she said, you're the only person who ever says thank you to me. How could I refuse to help you out?
Wow.
Who thought of that I was generating loyalty just by, what to me was a normal politeness. But just never forget the power of that. All right. And so here I really bailed. The resources interested in a similar path. I really think that leadership is experiential. And you learn by doing it, making some mistakes, and learning from those mistakes and not being embarrassed about it. So get experience. Your department has committees that they need people to help with. You do it, and you move on to a leadership position in your department. Your institution does, your regional SAM or ASEP does, and CORD or SAM, they're always looking for people to help. You get on the committees, you do a good job, and you're not embarrassed when the opportunity comes up for a leadership position or to take on some responsibility to do it, because that's how you're only going to learn this stuff by doing it. Look for role models. I think there's no one person who's going to be your role model, but there are all sorts of people you're going to admire for different reasons, and just look at the pieces. Be aware of what it is that you admire that person for. Take a moment to reflect on why you, and try and just emulate that or treasure that piece of it. And you come up with your own collage of role models that help shape you. And I'm actually not so good at this. It took me a long time. I've always done things sort of intuitively. But I learned, for instance, if there are certain talks that as a program director you're going to give every year. a graduation speech, an orientation speech, the, in-service is coming, you got a study speech. And I would sort of write down my thoughts beforehand. I learned is that afterwards to go back and write down how it went, so that next year when I went back to look at those things, I could remember to build on what I had done and what worked and what didn't. So find some way to reinforce your own successes. So I'm going to go back to my fortune cookies. 90% of success is just showing up. Who's liked by all is respected by none, which is important, but it's overwhelmed by they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's amazing what can be accomplished if you don't care who gets the credit. If you don't take risks, you'll always work for somebody who does. And you can't be a hero without a crisis. And that is all I got.
So, so we can unmute. And Taka, you have a question which I think is really valuable.
Taku, are you there?
Taku? I see you went on off mute. I can't hear you. I will read the question. I don't know if you can.
Now?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
My question was because you kept on using the word role model, and I was just surprised that you used that word instead of mentor, because I have role models and I have mentors, but I kind of think of them a little bit differently, and I conceive of them differently. I was curious of why you chose that word.
Maybe it's more personal. I think that's a good point. I find that I do better modeling, and I've been less successful asking for help because I need to figure out how I'm going to do something my own way, and I want models, but I don't want people to tell me how to do it. I enjoy being a mentor. I've had some good mentors, but it's never been my own personal style.
Mm-hmm. I also wonder if some of that is generational too, that, I think we've moved to sort of saying that anybody who helps us with our career, people that we run stuff by, are mentors. But there's so many different gradations of mentorship also. I mean.
No,
Yeah.
I think that really actually makes a lot of sense. And I was just sorry, I was just thinking about it, but I think that I'm just thinking about you're trying to help a resident or somebody, and they goes, listen, you should really, obviously I'm on I have a lot of mentor side of things, and that's my inclination, and I'm always like, oh, you should reach out to this person or reach out to this person. I've always never, oftentimes they wouldn't do it, and that actually, it's just a reminder that it's not a one-size-fits-all sort of solution. I think that I never really thought about it that way.
Right, and a lot of times you can tell a resident, think about who is the sort of doctor you want to be, or think about who is perceived by their patients and the residents the way you want to. They don't need to go talk to that person.
Right.
Because a lot of times people are naturals, and it's hard for them to express it, but the residents already had that self-realization that here is something that I would like to emulate, but they haven't done it. So they're just different roles.
Yeah. I like the example you gave of that some people just can't be led. Because I think everybody kind of struggles with that.
They do. I learned a lot about studying personality disorders. I think we have a lot of personality disorders, and so the narcissist, you have to be really authoritative. The borderline, you have to form firm limits. But there's always going to be the antisocial that you can't do anything about.
Yeah, that's true. I think everyone can relate to that.
Phil, can you do you mind just something I've always struggled with is that, you know, you were talking about you know, your cookie 2 and your cookie 2.1, that it you know, that if you're liked by everyone, then you're not respected, but then they you know, that those two but juxtaposed, and I think that it's always sort of a hard balance. Sometimes, you know, there are things that you think, you know, a resident or somebody needs to hear, but then, you know, how do you balance is what they can hear? And I think that you know, and then the second one is that, you know, in this day and age where we're sort of like, you know, you know, I'll just, you know, for example, you know, our bonuses are based, you know, are partially based off of our evaluations. And, you know, I consistently from graduates had people say, you know, I just want to say I appreciate how much you always cared, and that, you know, I really didn't like you in my first 3.5 years, but then, you know, and I think that a lot of us have that sort of, you know, but at the same time, there's a point at which you become, you know, if you're always doing what is in their best interest, you can sort of just be, quote, you know, too heroic and just, you know, throwing yourself on the fire just so that they can survive. Or because how do you balance that?
Well, I think you just articulated it as well or better than I could. But you don't do it from a place of anger, right? I mean, I remember the first year my residents bombed the in-service, I wrote them these horribly angry letters. You can do it from a place of love. You know, it's like, you know, man, you know, you really did terrible. I feel bad. You know, are we not supporting you? Is better than you didn't study enough. You don't really take this seriously. You did really bad. You can care about them without being their buddy, right? I mean, your parents do it all the time. And so you can try and take that model. Now that's easier with when you're the program director talking to residents, and it's not as easy when you're leading a committee of peers. But you need to use sort of the same thing. It's like, man, you know, you're my friend, you're this great guy, and you just screwed up. You know, how can we fix this? Is holding them accountable, but doing it from a place of empathy and caring. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as opposed to just trying to be harsh, either because you took it personally or because you felt that you had to be harsh.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think that sometimes the more successful struggles or, you know, issues that occur, like you really do have a choice of how you approach it, and whether you approach your person as somebody who's trying and cares or doesn't.
Yeah, and I mean, you have the same goal that they do. I mean, mm-hmm. The resident wants to be a really excellent doctor, which is all you want. And so you just appeal to the fact. You know, the conversation that I'm really used to having is the resident who comes in because they're upset about a bad evaluation by a certain faculty member. And my point is that you need to go hug that faculty member and nurture them, because they're somebody who really cares about making you better. And you're only going to get better if people show out your problems. And even if you disagree, you are cutting off your foot if you disenfranchise that mm-hmm. faculty member and they don't want to put in the effort to give you weaknesses. You can choose what to do with it, but the nice evaluations that say, good kid, nice job, are never going to make you great. And most residents with a little maturity and thought will buy that. Mm-hmm. And I just challenge them to, you know, go get that faculty to keep giving you evaluation. Show them that you care, you know, and I think that they get that.
Great. I have a question, and you know, I had a very interesting dilemma this year where we had 5 amazing people sign up for the 3 chief positions that we have in our group, and really phenomenal leaders, all of them. And I think one of the problems with elections, you know, and it's you know, it's not a fully elected position, but it's there's a lot of input from the team. And the two people who have not been selected, I think feel there's a certain level of embarrassment or level of being let down. How do you know, for people who are fantastic leaders and don't get selected for a leadership position, who have great potential, how do we as mentors maybe nurture that, and how do we try to get away from that sense of like embarrassment if you don't get selected for a single? I mean, because I think many of us, I certainly know that I have failed more than I've succeeded, but it's a harder position to be in when you're the person on the other end.
Yeah, I mean, I always feel bad. My formula is, first of all, I tell them first,
Mm-hmm.
you know, hey, you were one of the top runners, but you weren't in the top 3.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think you would have been great.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't let this turn it off. Let's meet in a few days and discuss, you know, how you can contribute, and let them get that by email and process it in private, so they don't do something to embarrass themselves in their immediate moment. Yeah, then we talk, and I say, you know, you've got some good peers. I know you're going to support them. You've got great potential. It's just the way, you know, this is how life is. I don't try and sugarcoat it or pretend that they didn't lose, or give, you know, and I don't give them a consolation prize, because I just don't believe that everybody gets an award. And you know, and I let you know, then I go back to them in a month or 2 and say, hey, you know, here's something you could do. I've been impressed that the grown-ups are grown-ups.
Yeah.
But great. I learned my lesson not to announce it to the whole group before I've told the front runners they didn't get the job, because that did not work well.
Right. That makes sense.
And I was not chief resident, so no, I have that working for me.
So did you you specifically contacted via email so that just to save them the embarrassment of kind of having that conversation like that, or?
Yeah, I usually don't like email for anything that has emotional content, but sometimes with something like that, I think that gives them the opportunity to handle it in private.
I actually call people just so if there's an, I actually call people just because I want to make sure that if there's an emotional venting, if there's an emotional sort of need to process, that I'm there.
Yeah, I get that. I worry that in the emotion of the moment, I might start saying things like you were close, or you should, or that I might try to
sugarcoat it.
Yeah, and I think that you learn from these things, and you have to not be sheltered. But I get your point.
Yeah.
And I've done it different ways.
Yeah. And I will say I agree with the sugarcoating component of it, of feeling, of being, probably needing to script that very carefully.
Yeah.
Wow. This is all very great advice. Do we have any other questions from the group?
Well, I really appreciate you guys spending an evening with me, and I'll be